What's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where a Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. Of course, it is me representing the UK, currently in Dubai at the moment. Of course, you've got Andrew representing the Stars and Stripes. How are you today, bud?
Dude, life is good. I cannot complain. Actually, we're getting ready to kick off our preseason here with college soccer, trying to get my boys ready to roll. So a lot of soccer happening, at least for me, even though we're kind of in the off season of more of the professional vibe of soccer, but it's all good.
Nice, man. It's been an interesting sort of the time the Copa America's finished. We've had, of course, the Euros, which we will get into. Lots of work on the transfer market, which will be interesting to kind of jump into as well. As well as that, we've obviously got our Nutmegged of the week, and of course, our Take It or Leave It. So excited to get stuck into this week's episode. As we talk about it, I think it makes sense for us just to bite the bullet and go straight in on the two tournaments that have just finished, the Copa America and, of course, the Euros. Andrew, which one would you like to begin the post-mortem on at the moment?
Let's do the Copa first, because I know we're going to have some interesting conversations about what happened to England after they did make it into the final of the Euros. So I know that's going to hit a little bit more closer to home for you and maybe some of our listeners. So I'll walk us through just the picture of what happened with the Copa really quickly, and then we can kind of break that down a little bit. So let's look at the Copa first. So if you have been living under a rock and not paying attention, we've had two major tournaments happening across the globe. Of course, we've talked about the Euros happening in Europe and the Copa America happening over here in the Americas, where I am currently residing. So the Copa America, for the uninitiated, is essentially the Euros, but it's just happening between the two American continents with a variety of teams going up against one another. Go back, listen to some of our previous episodes as we broke down what happened in the group stage, and then our most recent episode talked about some of the things that happened leading up to the final. And now we'll talk about that said final, which the lead up to this final, there have been a lot of drama in games that were actually quite competitive in the Copa. So you were seeing some people comparing what was happening in the Euros to what was happening in the Copa. We were seeing more goals and more action happening in the early stages of the Copa compared to the Euros. However, as we got into the latter stages of the Copa, you started seeing teams more kind of buckling down, getting a little bit more aggressive in terms of fouling to try to stall the game, to throw the other team off. So unfortunately, that is kind of what we ended up seeing in not only the final, but then some of the games leading up to that. But the final specifically, between two powerhouses of Argentina, of course, as to be expected, one of the favorites going into this tournament, probably between Argentina and Brazil. But with the run Argentina has been on in the previous Copa, winning that, then also the World Cup, and then now making it into the final of this Copa as well, with the depth that they have, quite expecting them to be where they were. They were going up against Colombia. Now that is exciting, just because Colombia had been on like a 27-game unbeaten streak coming into this match, which is absolutely insane, because Colombia is not necessarily one of the teams that you think about as being a dominant force in the Americas. However, they have really stepped up. They have some solid players that are playing great football, as well as now are starting to have enough depth to be able to compete in tournaments like this and get the results that they need. So this final happened on July 14th. It ended up not being not having a goal at all until the 114th minute. So it was a back and forth game, like I had talked about. It was not free-flowing soccer. It was much more Colombia committing some fouls, getting a little scrappy, trying to throw Argentina off, because Argentina were the favorites coming into this match, and Colombia knew that and wanted to disrupt that type of gameplay. And they did a fairly good job of it, going in and really preventing a lot of great chances for Argentina and kind of dictating what that play looked like. And ultimately, that goal coming again in the 112th minute, Lautaro Martinez as a substitute coming on and scoring that goal, and I think actually being the Golden Boot winner as well. And he was being used mostly as a substitute throughout this tournament, but still just bagging goals off the bench left and right. It was awesome to see a lot of stuff happening in this match too, with Messi going down with an injury to his ankle. You saw him crying, and then you saw the pictures, hopefully on social media, of like the watermelon sized ankle that he had. So a lot of drama, but then Argentina coming away again with that 1-0 victory in the additional time. So I don't know if you watched this game, if you saw the highlights, what did it look like, feel like to you over there in Dubai?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I caught the highlights of the game. It was like 6 a.m. Actually, do you know what? I might have woke up for work and then seen it was still playing at the time. I'd been the extra time going on when I caught it. But it means as expected, right? It was never going to be a walkover for either team. Like you said, Colombia had a great performances coming into this tournament. They obviously beat that Uruguay team, which had a great tournament. A lot of people were willing them to the final. They won 1-0. And if you remember, there was that Darwin Nunez jumping into the crowd at the end of that game, quite a heated game. And I think perhaps fighting with some of the audience in the crowd and stuff. And then that was apparently looking to protect his family. And the issue was there was fans sitting quite close together who were Colombian fans and Uruguayan fans close together, and some of the Colombian fans were essentially giving them stick towards the families of the Uruguayan players. A lot going on there. But then the game overall for Argentina, I think it was kind of written, I would say, just from how dominant Argentina are as a club, as a team, as a squad, but also the depth they've got, as you mentioned as well. It was sad to see Messi, for me, like in tears, and also the pictures, like you said, just not the way you'd want that to end. However, you've won. So it's a very bittersweet moment for him. Great to kind of see for his legacy again. I feel like, the question to you is, can he do anything? Like, is anything Messi can't do? Like, surely he's completed everything, right?
He's certainly the GOAT. I know that debate has been going on now between Cristiano and Ronaldo for a long time. But now with Messi winning a back-to-back Copa as well as the World Cup and playing a difference in this tournament, maybe not as much so in the previous two tournaments, but still leading his team and providing ultimately the dubs in these must-win matches to get the most decorated trophy cabinet of any soccer player now. Crazy. I mean, he's got to be. Come on,
like, it's just incredible for a player. For how many, I don't know how many years he's playing football for, but just the number of trophies he's won now, and the performances, and how we can just break into, he can just set up in any team and still perform whatever the situation is. The players around him, the one constant. There's probably only one full episode, I suppose, when the day does come that Messi retires, where we just have to sit together and just go through every single the accolade he's done, and it's been crazy. But yeah, great tournament overall. One thing I just remembered as well that as you were speaking, I just realized, I was talking about fans and stuff. Did you hear about the fans that were trying to force themselves into the stadium? Did you see that?
I did. And unfortunately, that overshadowed a lot of what happened in the game because it ultimately delayed the game 90 plus minutes. And it was literally fans coming to the stadium and forcing themselves up to the gates. Then it was just such a massive crush of people that they ultimately, the organizers of the tournament, ended up just opening up the gates because it was causing so much issues and injuries. And they were lifting kids over barriers to try to get them out of that, just tons of people shoving each other. Then once the gates happened to be open, they all flooded in. You saw people climbing through ventilation units trying to just get into the match. And the other sad part of this is there were people that had tickets that paid the exorbitant amount of money just to go to this game, and then they weren't able even to get in because of this situation. Now, after this game happened, there were a lot of accusations being thrown around by the governing bodies overall. And if this was not a FIFA tournament, so the World Cup is kind of organized by FIFA, this Copa America is not affiliated with FIFA in terms of them hosting the tournament. So it was not professionally managed that way. There are different CONMEBOL. So there are different federations that kind of organize some of these more local types of tournaments. So CONMEBOL ultimately is the one that was responsible, even though they were some of the people coming out and saying, it was more CONCACAF that were actually supposed to be doing this. But CONMEBOL was the one that organized the tournament. And CONCACAF said, hey, we didn't have anybody there. This wasn't our tournament to run. So CONMEBOL tried to deflect some of that, but really it's on them in terms of the organization. And after seeing like all of the reports, it looks like they just skimped on security because they didn't want to pay extra costs. So there was only one line essentially of defense where tickets would be collected and people would have been allowed in. Normally in a tournament, how this would work is there are 3 lines of defense. You have the first one when it happens when you go to attend the stadium, whether you're parking, whether you're walking. People check to make sure you have a ticket, and then you're allowed to go into park or at least enter the stadium facility. Then you have a second one where tickets are actually scanned to allow you to go to the next checkpoint to make sure you have that ticket or whatever pass is necessary or is required. Then after that third one, that's when you get to like the seating areas. Then they'll scan your ticket one more time to make sure you're going into the appropriate seating area. Because sporting events in the US are a little bit crazy, especially major tournaments like the Copa. So they normally have that type of structure in place. But CONMEBOL said, we don't want to do that this time. We're going to literally have just one of those. And obviously that was a very poor decision because injuries, people getting frustrated, overall a threat to some people's safety, players, families. There was one family of a player. No, it was an announcer. So Stuart Holden was one of the announcers for the game. His wife and kid got caught up just trying to enter to attend the match in all of this madness. So like that was a scary moment for them too. So it was just rather unfortunate to see how bad it was managed. And it also makes the US look so bad because we're going to be hosting some of the World Cup in just 2 years. So we kind of got to get our crap together to get that organized. The one caveat, though, which makes me not as worried, is it was CONMEBOL. CONMEBOL won't be associated with the World Cup and the planning of that. So that makes me feel a little bit better. But unfortunately, that overshadowed a lot of the game.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of overshadowing as well, there was Enzo Fernandez. I think you saw that on social media. There was a couple of chants that said that he was caught up in the kind of that feeling of winning, and he's on the coach and he's saying some chants that the fans were saying about the French players, racial chants, and that then was shared by Wesley Fofana on social media. I think he did the an Instagram story, just sort of listing like with the video being like, this is what's happening. This is the world we're here. This is the race establishment we're unfortunately a part of at the moment. And that obviously was not received well by the Chelsea players. So they also like a couple of them unfollowed him. And there was just like a tense environment. Then you had Jackson, Nicholas Jackson, who kind of came out and said, look, this is not what he's like, posted a video of him interacting with a child, and talking about like, look, this is not what he's like. This is he's always been great with kids and great with all races, and he's not racist at all, and I support my brother, etc. So, obviously since he's won the Copa America, he's not been back in the Chelsea camp yet, but that'll be an interesting one to kind of monitor and see how that kind of pans out. Because he's obviously a great player, world-class player. And I think the players will eventually come on board. Whether there's kind of disciplinary hearings, that should be said as well, is another question, but more needs to be done from that side, just because players feel like, oh, it was the whole idea of being winning and that got caught up in the moment. Still, it's not good enough from a player who plays with a lot of players from different races, different cultures in Chelsea. So he should really be doing better from that perspective as well.
Just a quick beat on that. Football and soccer, the world sport, it gets everyone involved. I had this amazing experience when I was in college. I was a sophomore. We were going to Tanzania for a couple of weeks to study food sustainability, to like learn the different things that they're doing over in Tanzania that can maybe be replicated and improved upon as we were kind of continuing our studies. And I was playing soccer for Walsh University at the time, and I brought a couple of deflated soccer balls. We brought them there, we pumped them up, and then we were hanging out just like in native rural communities, like learning about their agricultural style, and then handing out some of these soccer balls. The coolest part is we didn't speak the same language. Like I didn't speak Swahili at all. I know like a couple words just to be able to greet people, but we were able to communicate just through the sport of soccer because we both understood the rules, because it's the world sport. You can go anywhere in the world and play this game and communicate with any type of person. So it is just so disappointing to me when there are racist instances happening involved in the world of football. And it's not even for important things whatsoever. Like you win a match in a final, great, like that's cool, congratulations. But like why are you even referencing things like that? Why are you coming at players in such a way? Like that doesn't even make sense to do in any capacity, let alone after you win a match. Like, that is just so frustrating in general, that's still a part of our world. But then specifically in football, which is such an awesome, beautiful, diverse sport, like, I get so angry when I experience that. And thankfully, there are good organizations out there helping to fight that. And there are also good coaches and managers that make sure that's squashed, and that those types of players know that that is absolutely inappropriate and will not be tolerated. And I hope that's the same. I hope that's what happens with Chelsea and with Argentina, and for any player that goes into that negative side of things, because it needs to be taken care of. And we still have to have these conversations, which still makes me even angrier.
Yeah, very well said. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done across the world of football. Small things are trying to be done, but it'll always be prevalent, and there's more work that needs to be done from all sides, really. But overall, great tournament. Like I said, not to be obviously overshadowed by quite a few kind of scenarios and issues that can happen. But you spoke a little bit about obviously the World Cup coming through. How are you feeling off the back of that USA performance, but also the sort of like how the tournament was really held in the North America and South America side?
I'll speak to the U.S. men's national team part first. Super disappointed. I know I talked about that in a previous episode as well. We didn't even make it out of the freaking group, which Canada, a less quality team compared to the players that we have, made it out of a more difficult group. So I know they were talking about it's not Berhalter's fault, it's the players, a little bit on Berhalter, but it's ultimately that red card. But that is just an excuse. Like, that red card to Timothy Weah put us down in like the 13th minute or something against Panama. And then from there, obviously, it's going to be difficult to try to get a result with that. It doesn't matter to me what excuse you're trying to use. Getting knocked out of a tournament without making it out of our group, when it's a winnable group, or at least a group where you should be getting second, that is unacceptable from the player's perspective and from a coaching perspective. We had Jurgen Klinsmann, not the best coach in the world. I'm not a fan of his managerial or personality style, but he ended up taking a group of MLS players and getting out of a very much more difficult group in the World Cup, like 2 sessions ago or something like that, whenever he was around. I don't even know. I don't like to remember that time frame. But yeah, he did much better with less players. So it's very frustrating to me. Glad Berhalter is out. He should have been out. He shouldn't have had his contract renewed. The good piece to all of that, after my short mini rant, is that now Berhalter is out. We can do a clean slate here. We actually have a sporting director in for U.S. Soccer now, Matt Crocker, so he can take some time, look at the situation, and try to bring in a manager that will actually make a difference and will get these players playing up to their potential, because I don't think Berhalter has done that. And some of that is on the players, because they are the highest quality players U.S. men's national team has ever seen and brought together on a pitch. So with the potential that is there and the new manager that's coming in, as long as things are done appropriately, which seems like that never happens with the U.S. men's national team, but if they are, there is the potential for us to do good things in the World Cup. So I think the bar for us going into the World Cup is getting out of our group and winning a knockout stage game. Like, that's the next step of evolution for the U.S. men's national team. I'm hoping that's where we get. So U.S. men's national team, looking up. I think we're trending up is what ultimately is the view after all of this. Then on the flip side, us actually hosting the World Cup, I'm kind of glad that it's split between Mexico, Canada, and the USA. I would love for the US to host just a World Cup by itself, but I think having those other two nations involved will make us think a little bit differently and will allow things to get a little bit better organized, because you have to facilitate it with other partners. Because I would have been more nervous about this calm the ball situation and the poor ticket management and man management and security if it was just us, because the US obviously still has to have some responsibility for allowing that situation to happen. So I think at least it's a good learning experience, and our partners in Canada and Mexico will allow us all to have a good World Cup coming up. So I don't think that ultimately that poor situation that happened with the Copa final will really impact much at all, other than maybe just treat it more as a learning experience. So both answers were trending in the right direction.
Nice. Speaking of world, taken from the world, moving on from the world to Europe. I think we need to break down. I think it's time to break down a bit about the Euros 2024 that has just finished, I think, last week, where, of course, it was an England versus Spain final. I think last time we had this episode, we were recording just before the semi-finals. So England, I mean, we know it was going to be as it was going to be. We squeaked in just the timing of that goal against Netherlands to win 2-1. That's what I'll really have from this tournament, is those moments. I just don't think I'll ever have those moments again, just how we performed and to get to that level. But obviously we managed to just squeak past the Netherlands, which was great for Ollie Watkins just to score in the way he did in that 89th minute. Just, I'm thinking about it now. I've got a massive smile on my face because it's just incredible timing. I'm really happy for, of course, Ollie Watkins as well. And then, unfortunately, we go into the final where, let's be completely honest, and I think a lot of neutral would say this as well, with the tournament that Spain had, England, I would argue, were the dark horses in that game, right? So it wasn't a case of we weren't favourites. I would argue that Spain were always favourites in that. They probably had a better tournament overall. But I think the hope of the England team to squeak past teams felt like maybe we'll do something here, right? I think that's probably where it felt that perhaps we could do something here. So we are, and it's, I look back on that game now and to lose in the way in which we did, I think on reflection, I suppose it makes sense from Spain's perspective because they were the better team. I would argue on that day, they probably had the best tournament, and they probably had probably arguably the best players on the wings, I would say, of this tournament as well. Perhaps in Rodri, for example, and Nico Williams, and of course the Yamal. I mean, if you say those names, like, cool, I get it. England deserved to play better, and we played, I think, some of a better game, but I just feel like it didn't really click for us. There were definitely places where we weren't really attacking. The ball wasn't going where it wanted to go, and I just felt like with the time that kept going on, and when we scored that one goal, you're thinking, maybe there's something here. But unfortunately, it's that Kyle Walker on the left-hand side, and just getting caught out in the late of the game for me was just the soul-crushing part of it. We all understood, though. I left that game feeling like, I get it, the best team won, but I felt like it's now 2 finals, and we could have done something here. We could have done something special here, I think. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. And of course, England lost that game for the second time in a row in terms of 2 finals. So it wasn't meant to be. Spain won, and deservedly so, you would argue, on reflection. I've made peace with it now. I'm getting more comfortable with it. It is what it is. You know, obviously it's not great, but I've come to terms with it now. What is you watched, I'm assuming, I mean, who didn't? You probably watch the highlights of the game. What are your initial thoughts?
It went how I expected it to go. Spain, definitely the dominant team coming in after, like you talked about, the tournament that they've had. They've just looked so good, so consistent, and it's been so fun watching them because they're like a version 2 of what they used to be, still playing with a lot of possession, a lot of good passing and build-up play, but now they have more of a fun attacking presence with Lamine Yamal and Williams as their wingers, playing with more like actual wingers as they've not really done in the past. It's just so cool to watch them, and that has been exciting. England should be better than they are. And I don't know if that's like the same case with the USA. It's just poor man management, because Berhalter, as an example, just doesn't get the best out of these players. And maybe that's the same with Southgate, because the talent that England has, they should be competing at this level consistently. But the tournament that they have had, it almost feels like they're lucky to be in the final because they've just not played the best type of soccer. And they just didn't turn up in this match. Unfortunately, Spain, much more the dominant team. They had Spain 66% of the possession, which was to be expected. We did anticipate Spain having more possession. They're more of a possession style team. So coming in, but the 66% is pretty high. And Spain had 16 shots compared to England's 9. So just that overall between the possession, the shots, the pass accuracy of 89% for Spain and just 77% for England, it just wasn't England's night, and they just didn't turn up the way that they needed to in a final. Like, they looked like they played a bit better in the final against Italy. At least they made it more of a game and brought it to penalties, which was exciting the last Euros. And I think ultimately it was a similar case to what happened in the Copa, where it was just a bit more of like a foul-y type of game. And that's not necessarily England's type of game, more like a CONCACAF type of game where it's just a lot more rough. You try to slow the game down. Maybe if England did a bit more of that, that could have maybe thrown Spain off, because you would have had to have, as Southgate coming into that game, some type of game plan to try to throw Spain off of their rocker, because they're just so consistent, so good. I don't think Southgate did that. So it was an uphill battle to start with, and I just didn't see at any point where England could really do it. The fun thing was, though, seeing Cole Palmer come on as a substitution and then scoring so quickly. I don't know why Palmer was not played more throughout this tournament. Obviously a difference maker for Chelsea, but then still being able to do that with such limited minutes for England as well. Just give it a shot. I mean, why not? Bring him on a little bit sooner. Try to make something happen. If you're going to lose in a final, you may as well just throw all your chips out there. I mean, what the heck? When it comes to England in general, what was your thought process from a Southgate perspective? Now that we have hindsight, we know that he's out. England's going to be looking for something in the future. So, like, what did the tournament look like for you under Southgate?
Yeah, I think you said most of it there. For me, it was just a sluggish tournament. We didn't really kick off in that first few games, the group stage. I think from the group stages, the tone was really set by the media as well. The vibe automatically was, what's Southgate doing here? Because some decisions haven't been made that should be made, like Palmer, for example. Players just aren't coming on. Kobe Mainoo eventually came on and started more games, but where is that? And look, the tactical nous from Southgate just wasn't there. I feel like every game we got better, but there just wasn't something really clicking for me and for a lot of viewers, but also for Southgate. And he even said, as a lot of the Harry Kane came out and said it as well, like, just look, we know we're not playing our best, but, you know, stay with us here. We're improving game on game. But I'm just thinking to myself, this is a tournament, right? You've got to be putting aside teams like your Slovakias, for example. Like, you know, these are games that you should really be like comfortably winning and trying new things, perhaps, you know, putting some goals past these teams, and squeaking in just didn't bode well for us. And then I feel personally, we kind of, and this always happens as an England fan watching this, is we beat teams that we should beat, and then when we kind of get caught out when it comes to teams like your France, your Germany, your Netherlands, for example, and also what happened with Spain, like England just get caught when a good team comes up to us. I just don't think we've really got that energy to really take us over the line. So for me, when Southgate was like announced that he was leaving, number one, I was like, that makes sense. I get it. I respect the decision, number one. Number two, I was also thinking, from Southgate's perspective, he's done all he can. And this is what England now need, is a new chapter. And we need a new manager, a fresh manager. We're in, I would say, still in the ascendancy. We've still got some very young players that are going to come, that are in there, that need to be molded still. And I still don't think we've seen our best England team. I still don't think we've seen that. So when we have that, we are firing them, we have the right manager, for example, who is taking those big decisions, make those big decisions, and just we started winning. For me, when we start winning those games against like the top 5 or the top 10 teams, and we're not getting caught out by them, then I'll say, okay, do you know what? Maybe we've got a chance. Up until then, we can't just keep squeaking through tournaments or feel like we're playing good enough football. Do you know what I mean? There needs to be more for us. The Nations League is now coming up soon, which will be, I suppose, depending on who we get as manager, will be a really interesting one to kind of see. And that's when we get the test. Then we'll see, I suppose, clubs, bigger managers, for example, thinking about potentially England getting bigger sort of countries to play against, and that's the quality you really need. I feel like we're really lacking in that area. We've got the depth, we've got the players, we just haven't got that manager direction. We've got the foundation now as well, from like which Southgate has built. It just hasn't clicked from us from that perspective.
If you could have any manager right now, who would you select? The follow-up question to that is then, of any available manager that's on the market right now for England, who would you want? So give me your top pick overall if you could steal a manager from anywhere, and then any of the free agents, who would you pick?
I think there's only one manager that most people will want. Most teams in any country would want. I think Pep Guardiola would be incredible for England, not just because of the manager he's at, but the type of players and the way he could really pull these group of players. I genuinely think we become invincible if I would argue it's kind of like the Avengers. And when you have that final stone, I think Pep Guardiola would just suit the players who've got, the England team who've got. I mean, that would be a dream situation. And I've heard, and what potentially could happen is we could have an assistant, for example, for a year. And then if Guardiola, which is, maybe he stays for one more season, do we get him then? I mean, that would be interesting to see. And he's not said anything on the contrary. He's always said, I'd love to manage a country. That's what he's always said. So that potentially could be an option. So for me, Pep Guardiola is at number one. And then the other two from an available perspective, that's a tough one. I mean, two that come to mind, I don't think would suit England, is Jurgen Klopp, just because he's available. When Jurgen Klopp is available, it's just obvious that. Another one was potentially Pochettino, would be the two managers. Pochettino's probably got a better chance than Klopp, maybe, with the style of football we play. Those are the ones I think who are currently jobless, shall we say, would be, I think, a good manager for us to have. But an ideal one would be Pep Guardiola. What are you thinking?
I agree, and we're in the same spot with the U.S. men's national team. We're looking for a new manager as well. Some of the same names have been tossed around.
Okay.
Klopp. I think Klopp would be a perfect fit for the U.S. men's national team. The style of play that he utilizes, the man management tactics that he implements would just fit well in an American system. He already said, though, he's not interested. He wants to take a break from football. Respect that. Live your life, dude. Cool for you. Sad for us. Then Pochettino was thrown around a little bit. Pochettino is more of a man manager type of coach, which is okay. I think we have to be careful with that because Berhalter was kind of the same way, and all the players liked Berhalter, which is fine, but it can only happen to a certain extent because you want to have a player that your players like, but they also respect and maybe fear a little bit, just because you don't want them so complacent that they don't perform, which I think is a problem with the U.S. men's national team. So my thing with Pep Guardiola, because I've seen that thing thrown around as well, of maybe just having an interim manager for a year and then bringing in Pep as the England manager. Yeah, we all know Pep wants to manage internationally at some point. I've heard another rumor of De La Fuente, the Spanish manager, is now up for the U.S. men's national team job. If that happens, we would take him away, which I don't know if I necessarily want him. I don't know a whole lot about him yet, so I got to do a little bit of research on our boy over there in Spain. But then that Spain job will be open. And Pep had such a good time managing in Spain that maybe Spain will do a similar thing of having an interim manager for a year until Pep's contract is out at Man City so they can bring him in. But the one caveat that could be different is he's from Catalonia, and that's like a different subsect of Spain, which they've had disagreements between Catalonia and Spain before. So that may be the reason he doesn't want to manage there, even though I think Spain would probably be a good fit for his play style as well. And he could do some cool things with Spain to make them a dynasty. I don't know what will happen. I mean, if there's even a hope of you getting Pep Guardiola, I would throw the chips in for that. It's the same thing with Messi. So like Inter Miami knew like 2 years in advance there was a chance of Messi coming to Inter Miami. So they were getting rid of players and they were terrible for like 2 seasons so that they could have enough cap space and roster ability to bring him and the pieces that Messi wanted in. So I would suck for a year as a U.S. men's national team to try to get someone like Pep in. So if England needs to do the same, I could understand that for sure.
I mean, Pep at Spain would be crazy. Can you imagine that? The players that he's got. But I'm thinking right now, if Pep Guardiola at England, I just can't comprehend how we would not win something. It's the first time I would ever go into any game and think we will beat anyone comfortably. And that's just because of, how he is as a manager. Irrespective, sometimes he's got great players, but England has provided players that a good manager could really bring into play here. Eddie Howe was another manager that was thrown in. I think that's because he is an Englishman. He is doing very well at Newcastle. He took him to the Champions League the previous season. So he's a great manager. And I think a lot of people see him eventually as the England manager at some point, which I think would make sense. I think he's too comfortable to doing too well at the moment with Newcastle, potentially maybe next season, depending on that Guardiola. But I think right now, that's probably a no-go. But those sorts of managers is what England need. I think those managers, those higher level managers, will also be licking their lips the potential of being manager of this England squad. Like we've definitely got players that are like, do you know what? I could do something here with them. All they really need is that right manager, because the infrastructure's there. Like I said, we're playing in this the right way. It just would get us over that line to potentially pick something up, and that's what we really need to happen.
Yeah, the players that you have, like the U.S. men's national team, we will take all of your backups. Like that would be great. All of them would probably start for us. But at the same time, like, we drew 1-1 in the World Cup against England. So I don't know. I think that was just a draw of two managers that are just kind of stalemating each other, unfortunately. Let me throw you my take it or leave it because it relates to this situation right here. Ange Postecoglou will be a better manager for England than Southgate was. Are you going to take that or are you going to leave that? So that's saying Ange Postecoglou gets hired as the next manager for England. Then, over his tenure, Postecoglou will be remembered as a better manager than Southgate was for England. You taking that or are you leaving that?
I think that'll be hard to top what Southgate's done, if I'm honest with you. For what Southgate has done and what he's done for English football, just from an infrastructure perspective, but also the foundations he's built, but also the fact he's actually got England to those two finals, I think they're very difficult. Does Big Ange bring it home, is your question?
Pretty much, yeah. Is he going to bring it home? Because then he would ultimately, I would think, be remembered probably better if he wins some big tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, he'd have to win something. Is he the manager that would probably take England to the next level? That is the question. I mean, does he win tournaments? Does Ange win tournaments? I think is what we're looking at here. And I think with these players, anything is possible. But does Ange do it? I've seen what he's done with Spurs. And for me, I don't see him at the moment really. His style of play, I don't think suits the way kind of England play, I would argue. I think there's more kind of creativity. And I think and if you look at what he's done with James Maddison at Spurs, and how sometimes it feels like he's only really got Son and Maddison really kind of playing. The rest of the team around just hasn't really built properly, I think, anyway. And I feel like there was that one game where he had 11 players playing the weirdest offside trap, just literally off the halfway line. I feel like some of it is just too, and I don't think the FA would appreciate a manager of that level, I think, anyway. So I think those are my reasoning, perhaps, that I don't think, even if he gets in, I don't think we win tournaments with Ange. And therefore, I don't think he would have a better, let's say, what were you saying, better kind of over the past couple of years, better than Southgate. I'd not be remembered, essentially, better than Southgate. So I would have to leave that, I'm afraid. Just because I like Ange as a manager, I just don't think he suits England. I've not seen enough of him to feel like it's a safe pair of hands. And also, he'd have to win a tournament, which I don't know he'd have it in him.
I'm taking this one all day. I rate Big Ange so highly. And I think my comparison to England, and I have such a different perspective because I've watched England have all of these dominant players for so long and just not really being able to do anything or being such a dominant force, at least in my lifetime of watching soccer. And I'm just so jealous over here as the U.S. men's national team. We have MLS players that are making our rosters and how we're trying to compete with the world's best players. And the MLS, no shade. Actually, I guess some shade. I'm going to throw them some shade. They're just not at the level of what some of these other leagues are. And it's disappointing because they could be if they invest things right. Again, that's a conversation that I've had before and we'll probably have in the future, but not right now. I'm not going to yell about our infrastructure in the soccer in the United States. But Ange, I think, is the right piece, the right manager, because he manages his players so interestingly. He's creative with some of his tactics. Like, he's not afraid to try different things. And I think maybe that's the thing that England need. I think you just have to try different stuff because you have such a high level of player consistent throughout. And the depth is so deep for England as well that I think you need a manager that will experiment a bit until he finds out what the best thing for that squad is. I am a little bit questionable on his tactics. I don't know if he has like a full tactical identity either, which I think could ultimately be a good thing as well, because if he finds the right types of players in the England squad and then can adjust his tactical mindset to cater to what players they have, I think would be good. I also enjoy how he handles press conferences. I think he's almost like a subset of Southgate, like a little bit more fun, and he's a little bit more real, but he's still professional, which I think is what an England manager needs to be because of like the English media. So Southgate handles press conferences very well, very professional, very formal. I think Ange is the same way, but just a little bit more pizzazz in there, which I think is great. I hope he doesn't ever even get in the conversation for England manager, because I would like to have him over in the U.S. I think he would be also a great fit for the U.S. men's national team. I'm a big supporter of Big Ange, and I hope he makes a jump across the pond.
I was going to say, I think he suits a US team for sure. Can you? I can genuinely visualize it, and I think that would be really suited for that. We love Big Ange, though. I think he's a great, refreshing element to Premier League. Speaking of the MLS, I think it's only right that we break down the a 14-year-old making his debut for an MLS team. 14. Now, what were you doing at 14, Andrew? That is the question.
I don't even know. Like, at what age? So you're 14. So what grade are you in? Are you in like
year 9?
Freshman year? Sophomore year? Yeah, that's insane. Yeah. I didn't even know what was happening. I was probably barely able to kick a soccer ball still at the age of 14, which is ridiculous. So I will break down this U.S. men's national team prospect very quickly for us. But yes, making his debut for the Philadelphia Union at age of 14, Kevan Sullivan already has a contract agreed with Manchester City to join them once he turns 18. So this boy actually made his professional debut coming on in the 56th minute for an MLS Next Pro match for the Philadelphia Union 2. So this was previously before his actual MLS debut. So he's made his like professional debut ahead of that. So that was on March 24th, 2024, actually your boy's birthday. So I'm not saying I played a part in that, but maybe somehow in the weird universe of connections I did. So he actually provided an assist in that match in the 86th minute in a 2-1 victory for Philadelphia. So in his professional debut for Philadelphia Union 2, already making an instant impact. So then going on from there, May 9th, in 2024, he signed a homegrown contract with the Philadelphia Union. So the first team, that goes until 2028, and that is the 5th youngest player to sign a first-team contract in MLS history, and it was the most expensive homegrown deal in the MLS's history as well. So a lot of early things happening early on before he actually makes the MLS debut that you've talked about. So he's been a prospect for a little while. He's been talked about as like the American Messi, which those stupid terms are thrown around. I don't like adding all of that to it because that, one, adds a lot of pressure. 2, you're not going to have another Messi, or like comparing them to Ibrahimovic. You're not going to have another Ibrahimovic. You're going to have another player of their own style. So I'm never a big fan of those comparisons, but he is, I think ultimately that comparison is used to say how good he is, and he does look quite scary. So after he's made that most expensive homegrown deal in history, he and his family have confirmed through ESPN that there is the contract piece of that he agreed to with the Philadelphia Union that will be a transfer to Manchester City once he officially turns 18. So why don't we see all of these like young talents going over to Europe sooner? It's a visa issue, actually. So the reason that all of our young Americans aren't going abroad for 2 reasons. 1, because some of them suck and we don't have the right developmental structure here in the U.S. to send them abroad anyway. That's reason number one. Reason number two is you have to have a work visa to actually work in another countries, particularly in Europe, which underage also adds like a different element to that. So you have to have some certain type of approval, which can only happen then at the age of 16. So when you're 16, there are certain countries that you are able to transfer, and then you get a work visa to work, which your career is playing soccer. So that's why you see actually a lot of younger Americans going to Germany because they have more favorable visa laws. So you'll see like the Pulisic going over at 16 playing in the Bundesliga. Now with Sullivan, he wanted to go to City. That was part of the conversation that he had, and you can't do that in England. So that's why he ended up needing to sign and make that happen at the age of 18 to go and play for Manchester City. With that being said, we all know Manchester City is a football club powerhouse. They own other or portions of other clubs as well. So that does mean maybe he could go at the age of 16 or 17 to play for the likes of Girona or some of the other teams like Pomero that are associated with Manchester City. Now, specifically, the last piece on him, coming on and playing for the Philadelphia Union, making his appearance on the MLS side, being the youngest ever MLS player to do so, beating out Freddie Adu, which I actually had the pleasure of watching Freddie Adu play when he was essentially a kid. Back when I was a kid, he was the record holder up until this point, who was also a 14-year-old, but he was beaten out by Mr. Sullivan at 14 years of age, 293 days old. So officially breaking Freddie Adu's record by 13 days. So 14-year-old in the MLS. I know that's like a different vibe for some of the stuff that happens over in Europe, but what is your take on that? What's your perspective?
I think when you started speaking about this, I feel like it's a difficult one because that part of me feels like, is 14 too young really to be playing professional football? Is my thought. And there's a couple of reasoning. One person will straight before I get into that, one person will immediately say, if you're good enough, if you're young enough, someone said, if you're good enough, you're old enough, is the line that's kind of passed around the Europe and in the UK especially as well by a lot of commentators. And I think that all is resting around, I think, like Wayne Rooney in particular and how that was kind of panning out. And obviously he came in and how he burst onto the scene in particular as well. So 14-year-olds for me just need, I think personally, there needs to be more, the unit around them needs to be correct, because the media, the pressure can really get to you when we've seen that in players that are like 25, 30 plus. Even Ronaldo sometimes has some sort of that pressure when he played for Man United recently with that Everton fan, for example, trying to get a signature and he slaps his phone out the way. Like, some pressure gets to players that are seasoned professionals. And this is a 14-year-old now who is now getting thrust into this world of football, into this. I mean, I heard about it because it's making all kind of news, right? It's all in football news. It's, people are talking about how impressive he is as a player and putting a lot of pressure on his name immediately. And he's just made his debut. To top it all off, now he's going to Man City and at 18, which annoys me because I'm like, I knew Man City would be there somewhere. Good player, MLS. I knew about the links, for example, that Man City have. I knew at some point it was going to be happening, moving him to City. So I just feel like, maybe I'm just cautious about it, but I feel like a lot of these players need, a lot more kind of hand-holding. It needs more of a difficult environment than it has before with social media, for example. There needs to be more, for me, protecting of the players. And I feel like you'd argue, should there be, for example, like you can only play at a certain level when you reach a certain age? Would that be an issue? Do you think would that be the thing that changes it? Do you think there should be, for example, like you can only play once you get 16, when you get 16 years old?
I'm always hesitant when more rules are being implemented and more restrictions, especially if they're coming from the U.S. soccer side of things, because I already think things are so poorly managed that I get nervous that it will then continue to put a damper on development in terms of U.S. soccer. Our youth systems are already not where they need to be in the U.S., so putting more restrictions on the level of play that younger players can play in, I don't think is the right move. I'm more also like politically a fan of less government intervention and allowing the smaller units, the local government organizations, to develop what they need to put in the rules, restrictions, the developmental pieces as necessary for their local area. So I would love to see that coming through from the academies here in the US. I would much rather them develop these players in a way that is fit for each unique player. So, for example, I think Sullivan's situation is a bit unique because his older brother Quinn also plays for the Philadelphia Union. They're from that area of Pennsylvania, so he has a lot of family in the area already. So I think he was set up for success in that way by the Philadelphia Union, and I think their academy is strong. They have the right pieces there to develop talent like this. So I'm hoping that he is set up in a way that will allow him to continue to develop, and that this pressure, like you had talked about, won't get to him, because you're absolutely right. You see that with, I'm going to use an interesting analogy here, with Disney Channel stars. So all of these young Disney Channel stars that developed younger into these popular superstars. You're thinking the Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, the Amanda Show girl. So all of these people, young kids, getting this limelight so quickly at such a young age, like Kevin Sullivan at 14 years, and then they end up getting pressured inappropriately by adults, making bad decisions as they go into their teenage years. I'm hoping that that does not happen, because the academies have set up good situations. They've set up the right resources to prevent that from happening. Because I would be afraid to put a cap on his potential just because there is that negative media vibe out there of it destroying players, which it can absolutely with that limelight. But I would really just hate to put a damper on his development. If at this level he's able to play for an MLS team, I'm here for it. Continue to develop, and please play for the US men's national team, which I'm a little nervous because he also can play for Germany, because one of his parents, I think, is from Germany. So that's a little bit scary. But I'm really hopeful that he becomes the talent that everyone suspects that he can be, and that he has the right resources in place to continue to develop in the right manner. Sullivan, please be our USA savior and USA Messi. Thank you.
I mean, I think he can be from what the media is saying at the moment and how he's playing football, right? And if you look at it from starting at 14 and making your MLS debut at 14, there's obviously people around you that think you've got a high ceiling, right? There's obviously players around you. There's obviously management that feel like he's going to fit the identity and he's a solid player. Well, that City already, that like sign up from City shows a lot that they've obviously been monitoring him as well. So they know their ceiling as well. So it's going to be exciting to see his to monitor that. And hopefully, we never know. We could be talking here, for example, like 10 years time and being like, wow, remember we discussed him, and you heard it right here first, though. So we're talking through that. Before we get into our nutmegs of the week, I just want to do my take or leave it. Now, you might have seen that there's obviously, it's a bit of a combination, really. So there's some stuff at the moment with Kevin De Bruyne, Van Dijk, hanging out. They've been hanging out every year apparently for the past 3 or 4 seasons, right? And we know Van Dijk is a Liverpool, the centre back and the star player of the Liverpool side. Kevin De Bruyne, arguably Premier League's best players, played for Man City. My kind of question really is, and this is take it or leave it, players should not, for example, like rival teams, should not really be sort of chilling and hanging out together to bring the bite back to the Premier League. So take it or leave it is what I'm thinking. Players should not be sort of like fraternizing, chilling outside of the Premier League, because that will then, for me anyway, I feel like it dampens the days of the Roy Keane and Vieira and that kind of that bite of Premier League football, because everyone's so cool with each other and it's all chilled, and my kid goes to your kid's school and it's all like relaxed. And what are you thinking?
I'm going to leave that pretty quickly on the table for someone else to eat, because football is the universal sport. As I already talked about earlier, you're building connections. It's like a job. They're essentially your co-workers. If you develop a bond with a particular player from another team, live your life, like build relationships. That's what life's about. Football will end for you at some point. You're going to get too old or just not be as good anymore, and then you're going to fall out of the game. So the relationships are really what matters. Also, from a coaching perspective, as a college coach now, and also coaching in high school and in the minor league worlds, it's all about the relationships and the fun that you have on the pitch and the memories that you're making throughout. It's the same at the highest level of the game too. Eventually, you're going to get old and you're going to move on, but what you will remember in your retirement is, sure, those big, important games, winning trophies, but you're also going to remember and hopefully still have the relationships that you have throughout. So if De Bruyne and Van Dijk want to hang out and vacation together, more power to you. I'm not here to try to inspire people to fight each other just because we need more competitiveness in the Premier League. I think it's actually getting more competitive simply because the tactical minds are getting better. So I actually just watched a game from like the late 80s or early 90s just on TV when I was at a restaurant, and you could see the tactical elements were just so basic and rudimentary, and now there's the tactical awareness that players have, the different tactical elements on attack and defense that managers will implement is so cool. And I think that has almost replaced the like Roy Keane attacking players and just trying to get physical and in your face, which I'm more here for. At the same time, there are still going to always be players that are like that. Like, just look at CONCACAF. There are always intense matches where players are going to foul each other. They're going to get scrappy. It's going to be an intense game. And I think that comes down to more so managerial style and maybe some portion of player style. So I think we'll always have that regardless. But then you'll still even look at the international game too. There are still players that play on the same team that go up against each other that are surely friends, but then those international games are always quite intense too, and they're still fighting to win. So I think that competitive element will always be there, just maybe in a little bit of a different mix now with more tactical stuff integrated, which I'm here for. But yeah, I'm going to be leaving that one for someone else to scrunch up because, hey, if Van Dijk and De Bruyne want to be best buddies, I ship it all the way.
So even at like Premier League level, perhaps, where players, for example, are like after the game swapping tops, and you know, if Roy Keane was here right now, I'd be like, we don't want to see any more of that. I want to be seeing, if you beat a team or if you lose, whatever it is, I want you to go next time we're going to win. I want that bite. I want that. We're not swapping. I'm not swapping my shirt with you. I'm going to wear this next time when I beat you. Like, there's that mentality there where it's a bit more like, right, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what ties we have. We're gonna get at it and we're gonna enjoy it and we're gonna have a good game. So maybe there's that side of stuff. But I mean, I'm with you. I'm probably more with you than I am with that. But I just thought I see what you're saying.
I'm here so with the shirt swapping thing, I've never fully understood that. I was just like the cool extra element, like, hey, like this is a cool player. I'm going to swap shirts. But I am here for the competitiveness still, because as a manager, if we lose a close fought game and I think our players just didn't have the edge, I'll be angry and I'll yell at them and I'll make sure that they are feeling that loss and that they know what they need to do to improve and keep that competitive spirit. So as long as they're showing the effort and putting in the competitiveness, then I'm happy. If that edge is lost, that's when I start removing players from the starting lineup or having conversations with players to make sure that their head is in the right space, which maybe Berhalter wasn't doing. So am I the next U.S. men's national team manager? Maybe.
Wow. We'll see. Now, before we get into, I'll get into my Nutmegged of the week. I want to let you go first this time. Let you kick the proceedings off as we close out this episode. What you got for us?
Okay, buckle your seatbelts. This one is a wild ride. This story has been developing for a while, so I'm sure some of you have seen this, but this is absolutely crazy, and it involves Hulk. So Hulk, you know, the player who kind of looks like the Hulk, but also has the name. He's just this beefy Brazilian player who I think played for Chelsea for a little bit, but played in the Premier League and then ended up going off to play in China, had a really good career over in China as well, but also had appearances for the Brazilian national team. So Hulk ended up getting involved with this woman. And it happened when Hulk was just 19 and she was 37 years old. So this is when they met. So nothing romantic right off the bat, but then eventually things progress and they get married. So this older woman and Hulk end up becoming wed together. Then after a couple of years in, they're married, living their lives. There is a photo that goes on Instagram of Hulk and this woman, his wife, and the niece of this woman. So this woman had a family previously, so bringing in some of her family to the marriage with Hulk. And the niece ends up being very similar age to Hulk. So then another couple months or so pass, then you see Hulk's wife post something weird on Instagram saying, yeah, we're separate now, we're trying to figure things out. Then a divorce happens, and then you see Hulk posting a picture with the niece that was posted in that family photo. And the niece posted something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," to my aunt on Instagram. And everyone's like, what is happening? Then it eventually comes out that Hulk and the niece end up getting together and marry and have a child. So there is a child that has been had with Hulk and this woman's niece. So quite a weird inter-family relationship. So just to summarize, Hulk meets this older woman, they get married, and Hulk inherits some of this woman's family. It just so happens that she has a niece that is Hulk's age. They start bonding, end up getting together. He ditches the older woman that is his wife and then becomes married to the niece and has a child with that niece. What a wild ride for Hulk. Holy smokes.
Wow. I mean, that is, I mean, I'm trying to just piece it all together right now. Like, it just seems like, what is going on? It's a lot to take in, that is, because it feels like there's so many different elements to it, but wild. What a ride.
Yeah. little football drama at its finest. Like, holy smokes.
Mine was a lot more tame now. And I didn't originally think we might have the same one, but we don't. So my one is actually a VAR decision. You might have seen this already. So it is in the Venezuelan Primera Division, right? So there's a Porto Cabello played against Portuguesa in a game that finished 0-0. But in the 86th minute, there's a very, very questionable VAR decision. Now, I mean, this is obviously a podcast, audible podcast, so you can't actually visualize it. But I would love everyone just to check out the lines that are created for this VAR decision. It is mind-blowing how that is happening in professional football. Let's be real, like, you know, it's the Venezuelan league, but it's still professional football, right? To see that happening in the world of football is crazy, because if you're like a fan of the team and either team and thinking, what is happening here, you just can't comprehend the performances, and specifically 0-0 on the 86th minute for that level of VAR decision to happen is crazy. It's a massive nutmeg. If you see it is actually in disbelief. So yeah, check it out.
It's goofy. I have seen this and I was like, is this just like some amateur on YouTube just drawing this line? Because I was confused at first because the line is crooked and it's almost like a Photoshop line where like someone just drew like the pointer and just draw a line and then just kind of like moved it around. It is so amateur level stuff that I was confused that this was an actual match. A couple other pieces like that are frustrating, but that's like the main frustration. It was not even correct, the line that was drawn. The angle is inappropriate. The way that it was done was just crazy. But not all of those matches have VAR. Only some of those Venezuelan matches have VAR to also compound to this. So it's not an every game thing. Then on top of that, the match ended goalless. So it ended in a draw. So it was a 0-0 draw, which ultimately I think the referee somehow ended up making the right decision unrelated to the whole VAR thing. So it worked out, even though it was a goalless draw. But that's crazy. Literally just like a drag and drop pixel thing.
It's
so maybe
so amateur.
Maybe don't implement VAR if you're not ready. Maybe that's the solution here.
That is the lesson right there. Some really interesting, crazy stories. Well, mate, it's been a pleasure. Another episode. Jenny, final words before we close out this one?
My final word would be to don't get nutmegged if you're out there on a pitch. Of course, it's always my recommendation. And then also, if Hulk is around, keep your nieces safe. It's my recommendation.
Great. What an ending. Appreciate you guys listening. Have a great evening, day, morning, whenever you're listening. And hopefully see you guys soon. Enjoy.
Peace.